Yes, this will be an interesting. All right, so that should be live. So do we show up on here at all, or on Primal? Live streams and replays. Reply. Good radios. Interesting.
You're a featured creator. You're the one right at the start. Scroll right back.
Yep.
Go right back to where you were. You were right at the start of the queue in the featured creators. Yeah. So maybe just scroll through that again.
Oh, there you go. Here he is.
There you go.
What a guy. Intelligent Snacks is Intelligent Snacks live. Let's find out. Yeah, there you go. All right, we're live. All right. Okay. All right. I've muted that. Yeah, there you go. So this is us watching. I feel like every live stream starts like this, so this seems to be appropriate. All right. I'm going to grab that address. Let me just move this out of the way. Don't need to see that. All right. I'll move that onto a different screen, and then if anybody asks questions, go in live with. All right. Need to get rid of these. Old screenshots are not needed. Get rid of that. Where's my architecture? All right. Let's get rid of that. So obviously that's all right. So I've got the live share on my screen on my laptop, and then everything else on the monitor. So I'll focus up there. All right. Maybe hang on. Let me pull up my repos as well. This will probably be useful. All right, Anthony. So we were going to go through Wingman. I was showing you this yesterday at the end of the Intelligent Snacks podcast, and I think we decided that if I try and record a video of all of this, there's a lot of stuff going on and it's quite confusing. So if I try and talk through how it all works, and then your job is to interject with questions and say things like, why have you done that? What does that do? That makes sense?
Yep.
All right. Cool. All right. Nice hat. Nice hat. I think that's the first time our live audience has checked it out. Oh. All right. Cool. This hat looks terrible on me. I think you've got the is yours like the Presidio Bitcoin style or the Blockstream styles?
Mine's a Blockstream one.
Yeah, mine's the initial shipped crypto one, which was the early style, but it's not a trucker cap. It's that sort of like thin style of baseball cap that just looks shit on my head, unfortunately. So I'll avoid it. All right, where were we? So, Wingman. So Wingman Suite is what we call it these days. So the Wingman Suite is a whole bunch of different applications that come together where I run all of my AI workflows from. So the thing on the screen right now is called Flight Deck. And the purpose of Flight Deck is this is my human plus AI control center. So if I click on here, you'll see I've got 4 different agents that I generally work with inside this environment. And this is one workspace. So this is my most used personal one. And then I've got workspaces. I can have them for different clients. I've got a family one for the kids to play around in and stuff like that. And you can have the same agent across multiple workspaces. A workspace is like a Discord server or a Slack server or something like that.
Generally totally independent. There's no like bleed between them, other than you can use the same agent
Yeah, you
definition
can use the
between
same
them.
agent.
Otherwise, there's total
Yeah.
separation.
Yeah. Yes, that's correct. So the way it, yeah, so maybe if I start clicking into a few things, if I go over here, this is my artifact. So this is like a built-in whiteboard feature that all of my agents have access to, so I can describe stuff to them visually. So it just runs as like a local Excalibur that I then surface through the web. But the way there's several different bits to this, which is probably worth just like calling out all the names and how they fit together up front, because I think that helps just at least give a structure for stuff to sit. Which is, so flight deck is the green bit, and the green bit is all about where do we coordinate the work. So what's the work that needs to get done? How do we assign it off to agents? How do we check what they've done and then bring it all back together so that I'm not getting super confused? Because I think like one of the things we talked about yesterday was just, it's when you work with these agents, you know, in a terminal and a desktop app or whatever across 10 different terminal apps in different sessions, like it's so hard to not get overwhelmed by them. It's just too full on. So I wanted a system whereby I could remain unbothered, moisturized, you know, happy in my lane, just getting work done.
Absolutely.
Yep. So that's flight deck. And the way flight deck works is we coordinate across a few different control surfaces, which are just the sort of things that you'd be used to from being a human and working in an organization. So we have chat, we have documentation, we have tasks, and we have notifications and approvals. And then we extend flight deck with different functionalities with Wingman apps, or which we colloquially call a WAP. So that's flight deck. Flight deck has like the UI I was showing you a minute ago, plus a CLI which the agents talk to flight deck in. Now, the agents are where the work is done. So I have my own sort of agent harness workspace that I wrote initially about 14 months ago, and then it's been rebuilt 4 times. I think this is number 4 that I've got to that I'm pretty happy with. But the job of the agent harness is to run, it itself will run multiple agents on your machine. And it has agents that do work. It has pipelines, which are like custom workflows for agents to follow, which will execute any arbitrary code plus agent sessions against a defined set of rules. And then it has the WAPs, which are the Wingman apps, which are things that where we say, this is like a custom program, UI interface, script, or something that needs to run like any sort of like it's like internal tools. Think about it for your business. And then they can be surfaced.
Harness is a bit of an overloaded term, right? So
yeah, that's pretty true.
You should clarify that it still calls out potentially to lower level harnesses like Goose. So you could have Goose as a local harness on your machine or somewhere, and then your so-called harness, maybe you need another name, but that sits above that and can call out to these other harnesses.
Yeah, I used to call this a harness like prior to everybody calling everything a harness, which is kind of, it felt like the right word. Like these days I'll often refer to it sometimes as like an orchestrator, where I'll say, because I used to see these like little agent harnesses as the agent was in my mind, but so maybe the language is a bit off. But so there's multiple harnesses in here, so I can run Codex, I can run Claude Code, I can run Goose, I can run Open Code, I can run Gemini, although I haven't done for about a year and a half. I can run, so it might not work anymore. And Pi inside here. And again, if I use Goose or Open Code or Pi, I've then got providers and different models that I can choose from for any of those. And the idea is that any of those harnesses can be fired up. And so I can have a session on, so if I just do Goose, I think if I do default, now let's go to Word 5, my most successful consumer app. Yeah. So you fire up a session, and this is going to look pretty common to like anything else that you have, which is like if you started a Goose in a terminal, you would be able to, you send a message, you get messages back, and it just gives you a place to work with the agent. So the idea of putting it into the UI like this was just, I didn't really want to sit at my computer and work with these agents in the CLI, I wanted to be able to walk around and do stuff. So my early thing, I don't know, a year and a half ago was just, why the hell would I sit in front of my computer if there's a robot on my other computer that's doing all the work? So I went and bought like a Mac Mini. So if I just do this, there you go. That's Wingman. In many ways, like that's what he looks like. He was, probably got that about a year and a half ago, and the idea is to just have an always-on computer that serves this agent harness for me, and then I can get this from anywhere I want in the world on any other computer or via my phone. So if I just go to Web Tools, just jump to a phone view. You see, like you end up with like a reasonable UI. Like the reason the UI looks like it does is I was using this from my phone for years. There's a few things built in here, like I can click this button and it'll give me an audio preview of what's going on, and you can have that set automatically. So if you're running a bunch of these in the background, you can have them just speaking to you when they finish their next turn and stuff. I don't do that. It's annoying. But yeah, so this is where the agents run, and then those agents can run in pipelines. And so what you'd have is, so these are workflows that you can define. And I usually define them by you just type in, what do you want the pipeline to do? And the agents will just build it for you. But if I go into one, so we're going to here, so this do in review is, I can send it a particular set of work to do. It has a couple of agents, I think. I haven't reviewed this for a while. Yeah, so there'll be an agent that produces a document, and it's set up to produce a particular style of document, and then a manager reviews it, and then we figure out whether it's done or not, and it'll either finish it or iterate again inside that loop. And so you can have sessions go backwards and forwards, just working on like the final.
So these 1 to 7 or whatever you've got, is that the stages of the pipeline? 1 to 6?
Yeah, these are the stages of the pipeline. So it would be, and this could be whatever you want, right? So it could be that so like, say another common one, I've been running a bunch recently. If I go back to runs, I need to check on this. I noticed this was failing yesterday, and I haven't checked in to see why it was failing. This one I think is pretty much all code. Oh no, it's got some stuff in here. So this is an agent that its job is to read LinkedIn for me. Like, I don't like LinkedIn. I find it annoying. So I've built like a little CLI that will allow an agent to go and read it. So it will run here a sync operation. And I think it runs like every 10 minutes or so. And it will just go and say, like, what's all the stuff that's going on in Pete's network, and just drag it back to a local SQLite database. And then it looks like it's supposed to figure out what's a valid perf opportunity and then persist stuff. So this code is incorrect. So I'll dig into that at some point, but it's not the most important of pipelines. But you can see you could have like just straight code pipelines as well. So it would just run
and
a script.
How does someone define a pipeline? Like, this is a representation of it. It's got the blocks cut. Okay, cool. So you do this.
Yeah.
So this is like a wizard. You type in English terms, like a prompt of what you expect it to look like, and then it will under the hood.
I mean, I've literally done these. Like, usually you can do it here. Often I will just be in a session with the agent. I'll just say, look, I need a pipeline that does this. Go and build it. And so these pipelines, there's like a declarative language behind this. So you can say, like, here's an agent step. This is like a step that runs code, and here's the function that it's going to call in the outputs. Like, there's a way of passing the objects between each step. There's like a defined way of branching or having loops and stuff go on it. And that's all built into the Wingman skills. And so if I just call like my local agent, Rick, if I go sessions, Rick, bollocks, the wrong one. Here he is, Rick. If I launched a session with Rick, and I said, describe the do and review pipeline in Autopilot for me. I should really just turn on the whisper thing, given that I'm saying it while typing it. But, which is what I will often do. Is obviously I've got like I use Mac Whisper, locally for that. And then on my phone, like I'll just use the built-in like Apple stuff. But he will like in the background go and like read the skills, figure out what's going on. Like it's aware of. There you go. So it's going to use the Wingman pipeline skill because I'm asking about that. He'll call a bunch of tools, and then when he's done, we'll get the final messages for this. So this is autopilot.
What about the cold start problem? So for example, I'm asking because I want to start to play around with this. How would I go about this? Would I just set up an agent, and then I guess if I have an idea for a pipeline I want, then I could just describe it, and that would be enough to get me started?
Yes. Yeah, so there's a few things that you would want, right? So you'd start with Wingman Autopilot. Here is the repo for that whole piece. So in here, this autopilot, you could run this as a standalone thing. You can install it locally, compile it, and run with Bun, or you could. There is a Docker container version in there as well, and you can just spin up the Docker and it'll run entirely inside that Docker. It itself will then install all of those sub-agents that we use. So Goose, Pi. If you do it in the Docker anyway, it'll install all of those for you. But then you have to like log in and set them all up. And there's a terminal component inside there to do that. But yeah, so and then once you've got that, it's effectively just like working with those agents on that machine or inside that container, however you set it up.
Yeah.
And that's what this is. So this is Humans Institute. That's just my GitHub handle from years ago. Wingman Autopilot. Now the skills, Wingman skills in here as well. All this stuff is open as well for anybody coming and use. This is a set of skills that you can then install. So you would go and get your agent fired up and you say, go and get these skills and install them locally. And this explains how Flight Deck works, how Autopilot works, how the tower works, which we haven't talked about yet, and then how they all work together, how pipelines work, how we deploy apps inside the Wingman space, and everything else that those agents need to know. And as soon as your agent's got that level of detail, then it can start to be clever about stuff. So one other thing I just mentioned there was sort of applications. So if I go into here, so the other thing that we can do inside Wingman is then register applications and then expose those out via the same networking protocol that we use. So if we've got, so let's say I've got all this mapped on Tailscale, or I'm doing it via DNS with Cloudflare or something, then I can map like subdomains of my core domain that I'm accessing this through to an app. The point of that is that if I've got something like Book of Sand, it's already open over here, but it'll give me this subdomain. So Mild Zen Goat is going to pull up it's this app, but yeah, same one. There you go. So this is my Book of Sand. This is my I don't want to read Twitter. I just want to consume the news app. So this is my fancy newspaper of what's going on in the world right now, with a bias towards anything that's going on in AI and anything that's going on in Bitcoin. And so this will take. So again, there's an agent that runs like on the hour, and it will read all the updates in Twitter, and all the updates. It also reads Matt's Citadel Wire, because I think that's pretty good and aggregates a lot of information. It'll read, it does Google searches around a few different topics, and it'll just try and find out what's going on right now and what are interesting things, and then gives me like a core story to look at, and just writes it up in a nice, just non-engaging way. So I can just read it like a human, like we used to back in the day. But so that's an app that's run entirely on this specific autopilot. And so the idea was I wanted to make it very easy to then build and publish these applications. So anything that we need a custom app to do, we can have set up in seconds by asking a question.
Yeah.
So I just jump back to the. So they're the core
that list, there were WAPs. That long list you had, there were examples of WAPs.
Yep.
These? Yep. Cool. So you've got a whole bunch of WAPs, and for a user that would be interested, as you said, like it's very easy to describe what the intent or like what the idea for a WAP, and then because of all the skills and the domain knowledge that is built into this set of repos, products, whatever, services, you can easily spin up an idea like Book of Sound, like you've done.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and I would do that by saying, I want an app that does something like this. Yeah. And then I'll say, publish it as a WAP. And then, so I'm just going to drop into the chat that. There you go. Someone was asking, should they be using Wingman or Wingmen? And the answer is neither. Wingman was the V1 version of this, which was like Goose only, first version of the UI and everything that I did. And that's the 14-month-old one. And then there was Wingmen, was the one that replaced that. Because then what I moved to was a system that could use Goose, Codex, Claude Code, basically, and aggregated it across them all. And then now it's become Wingman Autopilot is the repo that you're after for that. So Wingman generally refers to the whole suite of products. And then Autopilot is the thing that does all the work. Flight Deck is the thing where we engage with the front end. I can post all these on Nostr maybe afterwards. So what else we got? The next component we've got is the tower. And so again, the purpose of the tower is to be a single backend as a service for multiple different applications and to provide services that we're going to need across Flight Deck and multiple autopilots. So when we run this, for instance, so like, usually on the podcast is myself and Andy. Like I run one autopilot locally here for me. I have another few in the cloud on different machines. And then Andy has his home autopilot that he uses, which is his Lara machine. And so we're spread across all these different machines. Flight Deck brings them all into one surface where we all work together. And then Tower provides one consistent backend for all of those different things. So your Tower does a few different things. It does. So everything is, again, I think I missed this at the start, but every single person, every app, every WAP, every person or agent that works inside this system has a Nostr ID by default. So we use that so that we always have the assumption that a user has public-private key pair, and that just allows us to do things with encryption or access that makes everything really easy once you've got that. Having that isn't necessarily the easy bit. Maybe I could show the app that I built for that problem later. But the Tower then is like a Nostr mediated backend. So there's no API key to connect to it. You put in the URL of a tower, and if your Nostr key has access to that tower, then you can access everything that's available on that. And if you don't, then you can't. It's pretty simple. And then what's available through there is an S3 storage buckets as a service, Postgres database as a service, a graph database as a service, and then Git is actually, technically I haven't done that yet. That was just when Buzz came out and I saw that they had Git, I thought, you know what, that's a good idea. I should add that. So I'll make that one a little bit yellow. That one's not, doesn't deserve a full orange yet. So these are all the component bits. So Tower kind of sits behind it all. So when you send a chat message on Flight Deck, what you're doing is effectively your Nostr key will sign a Nostr message and then publish that to Tower like it's a relay. It's not really built like a relay, but it's a similar semantic. And then the autopilot subscribes to that Tower relay as well. And it will say, Pete sent a message, sees that it's addressed to you because you're tagged inside the Nostr fields, and then it'll read it and start up a session, for instance, and then it knows that it can send a message back. So the majority of my work these days is in here. So everything we've seen here, these are all signed messages. Every interaction in that sense is a signed message. Yeah, this is pretty close to the way Buzz does it as well. This is why I had that moment of just being like, oh, for fuck's sake, when it came out. I think they're probably a touch more Nostr native than I am. So what I didn't do was use any of I didn't obey the kinds. So
okay.
I think there's a couple of different opinions on that sort of stuff. If you're like a Justin Moon, he'd be pretty happy with that. He'd be like, yeah, fuck that. Just do what you need to do. Use the keys and the identity stuff. So I use a lot of everything is Nostr identity based. There's a lot of like the Nostr libraries for encryption, decryption work. I use NIP98 a lot for access to remote systems, but I'm not necessarily constraining myself to using like kind 1 for the messages or something like that. I'm not using kind XYZ for groups. I just defined what made sense for groups and stuff to say, look, I know that I've got a particular database structure in the back end. I want it to work like a database structure just because it's not supposed to be spread across multiple relays. Like I had a previous version of this that was more like a Nostr relay based, where the relay was super dumb and didn't do any like heavy lifting work. But the problem I had with it was that trying to keep like a consistent state across multiple client versions of mine plus like other people was such a headache. It wasn't worth it when, we've got a system that you can just self-host the database yourself. So what I made it was this whole app is pluggable. So you can go to the same URL here, and if you're running your own tower, like I won't see you use the app, I will never see any of your data. It doesn't go through anything that I own at all.
Yeah.
So, so I think that's a reasonable trade-off for it, but it just didn't seem worth having everything as like a custom kinds and then dealing with trying to change those kinds later. And that's the trade-off I made. And then so this would tell me like what's going on. So the idea here is, if I click this little face up here, this is the whole workspace view, which will just say across everything that's in this workspace, what's going on, what are the channels that have recently updated. It sticks everything that's happened recently into one big long inbox, and then I've got a feed of different WAPs that are telling me information as we go, and then like which are the channels that have been used recently. So inside this workspace, there's a bunch of scopes. So we have like a DM scope. So this is where I would talk to different agents. There would be, I've got my DevOps, my home, other stuff, some projects. We've got some quick apps, and we've got Wingman. So I'll probably just keep it in the Wingman suite because this is pretty much open, so I'm not really too fussed about anything we see in here. And so inside a scope, you then have multiple channels. So if we take this autopilot channel over here, if we click into it, what we can see is inside a channel, what you're going to have is like a context prompt. So when we ask questions inside this channel, this is a prompt that's going to get provided to the agents. And I use this to just describe like, okay, so when I talk to you in this channel, I'm talking about this autopilot project, and this is where the code is, or this is the repo that we're going to be using. So make sure you work in that space. And this is how I want you to answer questions here. So it just allows you to have different channels for different reasons. Then we'll have like user permissions on here. So who can do what inside this workspace, inside this channel, sorry. And then inside that channel, you'll have chats, tasks, and docs. So I have and files. So I've experimented with like a bunch of different control surfaces to see what worked. And these are the minimum that I think I need, which is almost everything is a chat. And I say almost everything because you get to a point where the chat doesn't quite cut it. And then you need usually a task or a document for two different reasons. So what I'll do, so here's an example, right? So I got access to Maple Desktop this morning, and I was like, oh, great, I can use like Maple Desktop for agents. I like that. What I should do is get it configured so that I can put it into Wingman and see what I can do with it. So I instantly chucked it into here and said, right, go and read all the code and tell me how I integrate this into Wingman. He comes back and he says, so if I go, maybe we could like trace this through and I'll just show how they fit together. So I ask a simple message. He gives me a first response and then the detailed response. So if I click in here, I should be able to go to the session that was booted up in the background in autopilot. I'll give this a sec to load. Here you go. So this is that session in the background. So what's happening is it started a session on autopilot and it drops in with all of the details of where we are, what's going on. There's some like basic prompt stuff and then what I asked about. And then it'll stream that out And then when it gets to this final turn message, this is what is posted back into here, over here. Now, whilst it's thinking, like these thinking messages will stream back into the UI as well. So I can sort of see these as it's going along. Tool calls we don't bother with because it's just too noisy. And then when I ask a second message, it'll come back. So I think it was like when I came down here. Yeah. So we had that one. I think that's the one that the session did. And then I had an error when I tried to run it because I didn't configure anything. And then I couldn't configure anything. And I realized that it's not there. So then he came back and said, yeah, you can't actually do it. It's a hidden feature. You need a feature flag. So I've told it to rebuild the app and give me a new version. And so I think this request down here is probably the second prompt that dropped in. Yeah, can you compile and build a new version? Yeah, and so what it's done is inside Autopilot, it'll say, all right, we've got sessions that are running. This one's running in a codecs session over here in this folder, and that has like a Wingman session ID. And then when I send a new message, it says, oh, okay, all the threads that are in this chat thread here, they belong to this Wingman session ID. If that session is already open, it'll just inject it as a new prompt with all the relevant context that it needs. If that session isn't open, it'll go and recover that session from disk and then inject the new stuff. But it just means... Oh, there you go. It looks like he's just finished. I'm getting a bunch of feedback on your end, Anthony. I don't know if you've got...
Headphones.
All right, that's a bit better.
I literally just muted. I'm unmuted.
I mean, when it's muted, I can't hear anything. There's a little, like, a bit
I'll
of
just mute
background
myself
noise,
when I'm not
no,
talking.
it's gone now. It's gone. It was just a minute there. So, yeah. So, so that's sort of what's happening is that every time you ask a message in here, it either finds the appropriate session inside Autopilot, restarts it, injects the new prompt, gets the response, and then they will close down. They'll stay open for about an hour, and they close down on a schedule when they're done. If they close down, we can just restore them from disk. So if I go in here, if we go into home, if I go into the archive, it's 17,000 sessions and 951. So these are all the various sessions that have been opened recently. The auto sessions are sessions that were opened by the computer or a pipeline or an agent. So slightly different. That's why there's so many more of those. So like, even an agent can open multiple more sessions inside Wingman itself. And I think I've got it configured to say like, no more than 100 because it's going to get a bit full on the machine if I do that. But yeah, that's how it'll just burst out. So often when I send a job like this to Rick, what he will do is say, okay, well, I'm the main orchestrator guy. I'll figure out this is the project that we're working on. That project is actually in the Autopilot directory over here. Instead of trying to solve it remotely, I'll just set up a new agent inside that directory and I'll just coach him through it. So I think what you saw a minute ago when I was on that screen was like a callback. So that's the previous agent that had just finished its work as called back to Rick to say, I've done. And then Rick will evaluate what he's done and then say, is it good enough or not? So I only ever see Rick's responses here. I don't see any of the other stuff because I don't really care about it. But let's say I did want to see some of that. What I could do is I also track for any like larger piece of work that gets delegated, we'll create a task against it. Someone's asking, is this going to go on YouTube? Just joined. It'll be on Show. So Show Max is over here. There you go. Gonna finger guns the camera. But yeah, I'll probably put it on YouTube as well later. But it's Show exclusive for the cool kids. So any large piece of work that gets done will get created as a task. So again, like I let the agents write the task descriptions. They'll fire it off, and then what you'll see in here is like an activity stream of this is basically the sub agent just coming back and saying, okay, well, this is where we're at. We've sent the execution contract. Here's the status. Here's where they're at. This failed. that's not good. And then it just allows me to like drill in. If I care, I can see what's going on. So if I go into, let's just go into the test board as a whole. Yep.
It might be good to not label sub-agents with Rick, because I guess Rick's like coordinator, but actually some plebs have been doing the work. So
I mean, in a way, every pleb of Rick's sub-agent is basically just Rick. I a lot of this is designed so that I don't have to care about
right,
that sub work. So I mean, one of the things that we've come back to quite a lot on the podcast for the last few months has just been like, you know, I feel like we're just speed running like management 101, where, you know, we introduced AI agents and we go, oh, AI agents are the shit. Like, they can do all this work for us. We need a whole new way of working with these things. And then what we realize is that no, this is just like, it's the same problem as working with tons of humans. Is that, like, you know, if you're Tim Apple and you're running Apple, you know, you've got 100,000 people around the world. It's really confusing and you don't know what's going on. How does he cope with it? And he copes with it by having like hierarchies, scopes of work, different ways of talking to people, and then just different surfaces that he might consume that stuff on, be it management reports or task lists and various different things. But he wouldn't necessarily concern himself with somebody that is like right at the bottom level of the organization. Like, his manager would do that. So I use Rick to manage those things, and I think it's just going to get super noisy if I do it any other way. So the tasks allow me to see, like, okay, so what's all the stuff we're building at the moment, and what do I need to go through and check and review? And if I jump into those, I can go through and just see, like, what was the history of the deliverable of that task. And again, I can then jump into, you know, if I want to, I can go into autopilot and I can watch the sessions live. I can see the stuff that's going on. I generally don't do that anymore. I used to a lot more, but I've kind of got to this point where I just want to, like, have multiple different things going on and feel somewhat in control. And so what I found was, like, when I did this just on the chat is too noisy and I can't deal with it. So whereas if we have the chat, and then when the chat resolves into a piece of work, so this was some security hardening that I was doing, which I'm sure everybody in the vague Bitcoin space has been aggressively hardening everything that they've built in the last couple of weeks. It'll resolve into a series of different tasks, and the tasks allow me to see after the fact, like, okay, what was the work that was done that I still need to tick off and check. So my general process is very much like, you come up with an idea, you get the work done, and then I test it as soon as I can to close the loop and move it on. The biggest issue I tend to have is just this review column just goes insane. So I don't know, if I go into flight deck, maybe I feel like I've made more changes in there recently. Yeah, so like that's annoying. You know, there's not a lot of in progress or new. There's a ton of review stuff. I mean, the done is like the stuff that we've probably done in the last couple of days, and then every couple of days I'll just come in and archive them all off. But yeah, there's a lot of, so yeah, that's just a way of keeping on top of the work. And then the next issue that I've had would be, let's get a flight deck, I'll find some in here, is documents. So usually for a small feature or a tweak, or, you know, something that I'm just like iterating on a lot, you can usually do the whole design inside the chat. So you chat backwards and forwards for a bit, you talk about what it is that you want, but it's pretty clear that the agent understands it, and I can just get it to outline the steps in the chat and then dispatch that job. If there's something a little bit more complex, then what I would do is just have it outline that inside a document. So sometimes it's complex, sometimes they're not. But let me try and create series. Design for command palette search. So this would be, yeah. So this was, I was chatting to the document clearly here. This is a link to a chat. So this is saying, like, we were having a chat, and then I asked it to say, like, about how we do command palette search. So if I hit the command palette and I search for flight deck, it's going to pull up a bunch of results for me of different tasks and documents and what search. Yeah, so this could be tasks, this could be chat threads, this could be like different things inside here. And I was just trying to work through this, and I thought, okay, how's it going to work? What's the trade-offs of doing it one way or the other? Like, what's the performance impact of trying to run this search from the local browser database? This is what it wrote up as a response to it. It wasn't complex enough to need this, but the next step I have is that we have sort of embedded in here just comment threads as well, so I can come in and go, yeah, this is bullshit. This is fine. Whatever, right? So the idea is that sometimes I found that if I'm in a chat, I just can't give point feedback in a structured enough manner. And so it would be, let's try and find something in here, right? So maybe if you imagine all this got put back into a chat window, and I was saying, like, I agree with everything except this entry criteria. Then what I want to do is just have somewhere where I can very easily come in and say, all good except for this entry criteria. We need to work on this. And then it allows me to post that back as a comment and then have Rick review that document and answer all of my comments. And then we can like just zero in on that one piece. So this is something that I just got so sick of doing inside like a terminal or inside a chat window, where if you imagine you're in here, like, you'd be in here and you'd be like, all right, so I don't like this bit. So, okay, I've got to copy this and paste this and I'm doing this. And I'm like, okay, this bit is rubbish. And then once you've got like 20 of these comments, like inside a large document or a large feedback, you're scrolling around in a chat, you're going back and forth. It just wasn't nice. And I thought, you know what, like, this works really well. I've worked in a ton of like remote teams, and it works really well when I have basically something like a Google Doc with comments and track changes. So this is basically a Markdown based editor that's collaborative, that does comments and tracks sheet changes. So
this is this only for documents? This commenting?
Yeah.
Cool.
So when you say, is it only for documents? Like, what do you...
so if you are in the chat, then can you select parts of the chat, like what the LLM produces, and then instead of copying and pasting it into your response, can you then basically highlight it and say add to chat? So it like has annotations. The reason I asked it because Codex has got this like unified way of doing this. Sorry, the Codex desktop app, so you can actually easily put stuff in. Yeah, right.
There isn't So you could. So the idea would be, I could click that, and it would pop up a little button here I could hit, and it basically adds that into the text box.
And you can just rather than copy paste, just go through, highlight. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I could do that. I think what I find is I just don't. The reason I moved to the document for a lot of that stuff was I just don't want to do that work in a chat. I had this conversation like a lot with Andy, where I think both of us are quite anti-Slack. If you know what I mean, like we just like, for fuck's sake, like it's working constantly in Slack is not an ideal workspace, right? It's like asynchronous chat. I mean, it's supposedly asynchronous. Like anything that's chat is just not that asynchronous, where the chat threads disappear if you're in a big organization. And I think we both have this like history of just getting a bit annoyed at Slack-like interfaces, that there's nothing that's persistent that I could go to. So when I have like a document level response, I don't know if I've got this. I think of something where we might have done something that led to a bigger response inside here. I don't know. Maybe a security review. Trying to find something that would be like, feels like it's too much to deal with in a chat. Like these are actually pretty benign. Like, like this amount of stuff to work with is good. Yeah, but I guess like it would be like that sort of new feature type stuff. When you developing a new feature, you get like a whole bunch of feedback on something. Your chat, you're scrolling around in the chat. There's going to be like 20 places where you might want to annotate it. It was just a way of saying like, look, instead of doing it inside a chat, this is beyond a chat now. What we're going to do is I'm going to go away and do a review. I'm going to think about this. I'm going to write down the comments as I go. And then when I'm done, I'm going to hit the review button and it's going to go back to you. And then you're going to update it and come back to me on each of those points. And then once the points are done, then we'll continue in the chat. So that was the style of working that I was going for. And it's mainly off the back of just how I've worked with people my whole life in ways that actually work out. So yeah, so that's why we ended up with chat, tasks, and docs. And then inside the other place where you do have comments is obviously inside the tasks. So for any task, you get task comments. And if I came in here and I tag Rick, there you go, tag Rick, and I send a message about this task, then again, that will create a session inside Autopilot, pull in all the task details that it needs, and then run through that and respond inside this activity stream here. So you've got a few different ways of kicking off work, but this is the other place where we use comments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's all very power user feature rich, right?
Well, it's all made for it's exactly what I want. That's the thing, right? I was kind of thinking that there's probably a bunch of other people that have the same problem of just like, all right, this is too confusing, so I need something else. And like, so I know when I like look at Buzz, like there's a lot of similarities around like channel-based work. You can create channels that do stuff. Like you've got multiple agents that you can bring into that. You can give them different instructions. I mean, I don't like personify a different agent that knows about Autopilot to one that does flight deck. So my agents that I would use here, like let's try to think about it. Like the scope delineation that I use for these is more about like what they have access to. So I don't tend to I don't have in general custom prompts that say, you know, you're doing. Well, security work is a bit different. I do have Brick. He's my cynical Chinese sort of agent. But like, I would always like send the work to Rick, as it were. I might have like custom prompts inside the Autopilot directory that say how we do work inside this directory in this project, or how we do the work inside flight deck projects. And Rick delegates to those sub-agents, and they're the ones that I never see. But I don't have like a testing agent and a marketing agent and this agent. I would just have the same agent that has the core personality and knowledge that I want, then with a custom instruction inside that channel. So I'd be like, all right, we're doing marketing work here, so I want you to act a bit like this. And it's more just like a schizophrenic personality of Rick than an entire new personification. Because I just think it just doesn't work for me. I just don't need that level of... Now I don't want to have to remember like 100 different agents to know who I'm talking to. I want to talk to that person, and if I'm talking to them in that scope, they inherit all of the stuff that they need to know. So that kind of works for me. But yeah, so I mean, this screen is this is the flight deck screen where I spend most of the time, which is that like all the new chat responses will stream in here. So I'll always be able to see like anything that's red just means that I haven't looked at it yet. So if I go through and look at it, and we're good. So that's me trying to get Maple up and running. So I got access to the Maple agent, as I said earlier. So I want to plug it into Wingman so I can do it, but I need access to the ACP, which means I need to recompile it and rebuild it all. So I'll do that, hopefully tomorrow. Yeah, so basically I just flick between these different scopes that are there. See what's on red that I need to...
Sorry, I don't think you've talked about scopes much. Talked about workspaces, but explicitly you have talked about scopes implicitly, but explicitly.
Yeah. So scopes is... So, I mean, what you really see on here... So I'm in a scope called Wingman Suite, which is a collection of channels that I use to manage updates to this whole suite of stuff, where the suite of stuff is all of these different components that we've got inside here. So the tower, the flight deck, the autopilots. There's an app that I use to access all this stuff with Noster signing. There's all the different WAPs that we use commonly for it. It's probably the main stuff. And so that's what this is all about. And really a scope is just that grouping of stuff. And the idea here is this probably is interesting, right? But it's more of like, it's not a technical component so much as it's like a psychological or a management component, which is to say, this scope, Wingman Suite, is me doing technical updates to Wingman. So the stuff that I'm going to see on the screen is going to be technical updates to Wingman stuff, right? And then if I go into marketing scope, which I don't have in here because this is my personal machine, but if I'm saying in my home scope, which I won't go into right now, like I'm going to see stuff on here that's relevant to, all right, I'm doing work for the home, for the family now. And that's what I want to see inside this scope. And then everything else just disappears into the background. So that's the core reason that the scopes are used. If I click into the full workspace, it's every scope that's available to me and what's the latest updates that we've got across all of them. And then
so you've got your home scope in the same workspace as everything else, right?
Yeah. The workspace is, I mean, I could have it in a different workspace. It's more that this is like where I sit and work in the day. And so I have some work stuff in here. I have some development stuff in here, and I have some home stuff in here. And then the workspace itself is just running on the machine that I was showing earlier behind my laptop. So the idea is,
it depends on the individual how they want to mix things together. They could have a totally separate workspace for their home life, whatever, and then whatever the professional life is another workspace.
Yeah, and that would really then come down to just, coming in here and saying like, okay, well, I could flip into my other stuff workspace every time I want to do some work, and then I'll come back out when I want to do other stuff. It's more that because I'd probably pretty clearly, I've just developed like all of this on the fly as I went around my own working habits was the idea. And so because I started in my home workspace as like my test area, I've just ended up doing a lot more work in that space versus anything else. And because it's all like it just sits locally, I've hosted it all on my own hardware sort of thing. So I'm pretty happy with that. And then stuff that we're doing for work, I'll just have in the other stuff workspace. And then like there's a few test ones that I've set up over the time. But I basically just don't want to keep flipping backwards and forwards. So I just run it like this unless I'm doing stuff where I'm collaborating directly on other stuff, projects and client work. So, I mean, you can also just have two browser tabs open and do it like that. But,
what's your what's your goals for this work? Like you've talked us through how it operates and how it's all architected and but what's the goal for it? Where are you headed? Where's the direction? So
the idea behind all this has been, so other stuff as a company of mine with Andy David. So, you listen to the Intelligent Snacks podcast, as Deadman was on yesterday. Also gets streamed live to Show these days. So that company, we work with small businesses in Perth, in West Australia. And our goal is to build like robust, strong, small businesses that take advantage of AI. So we have a view that AI is going to be incredibly impactful for the small business that is high agency and gets stuff done, but has always been cost constrained on its ability to grow, do new things, service new business lines, and the rest of the stuff. And so we work with companies to say, okay, well, what are your problems that you have right now in your workflows? Like, what do you need that could be automated that you've never been able to do? Like, you've never been able to build custom software for things. We can do it now. And then we will deploy like one of those businesses a Wingman. And when they get a Wingman, they get effectively this stack of stuff. So we say, okay, you've got your own back-end tower, you've got your own autopilot, like one or more of those, and then you have like this flight deck to coordinate it all. And then usually what we'll do is come in and we'll use like a specific WAP as being like the entry point for this. And so like that's the sort of like thin end of the wedge where we come in and we'll say like, okay, like let's pick a problem that you have Like, because usually your problem isn't that I don't have like a communications place or I don't have a documents place where I can automate these things. This is just gives you an agent native version of that. So you get this as like a freebie, and then we'll have like a particular app that you would need. So maybe it does like inventory management, or it could do, sales lead identification using agents. It could use, maybe it's managing a social media presence. Maybe it's processing all your podcasts. Like different people have sort of different requirements, and we help them like custom build those, and then show them how they can go about like improving that over time, building their own internal systems and building these like pipelines and workflows that start to get work done for them. So the whole thing, like this is the bit that's always been. That's why I said like I kind of need somebody to ask me these questions, because I don't think I can just describe half this stuff.
Yeah, and this is not canned. These are not canned questions. These are genuine questions. No. Although we did talk about it yesterday, but yeah.
So, because when we have, I'm trying to think of something like, yeah, I mean, this was like something I was doing yesterday where I wanted to have, when we finish a podcast, like I hit my send off sort of thing, and it goes away. The pipeline runs. It'll process the episode to say like, okay, here's the MP3 version, here's the MP4 version. It'll do the transcript. It'll then ask me a question to say, who's the, who are the people that are involved in this? I've got speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3. Here's some quotes from speaker 1. Here's speaker 2. Here's speaker 3. And I'll say Pete, Deadman, Andy, Pete, Andy, Deadman, depending on like the response to the thing. And then it'll update that, give me the transcript, write the show notes for me. So this is like what we did yesterday. And this is like, so this runs basically as a pipeline in the background. So there's a folder on this machine that when a podcast episode drops in it, it fires up and it does all of that work for me. But I kind of wanted a place to look at it, because otherwise I end up like having to text Andy the stuff on Signal, and I'll say, oh, here's the transcript, here's the stuff. So I was like, all right, well, it'd be easier if he can just log into an app and then come in and see it. So what we've ended up with is often you have like a pipeline that does a lot of the work. The agents that are prepared to like have got instructions on how to do one component of it, a bunch of code that runs on a schedule or a trigger that just again sits in the autopilot, and then you'll spin up a little WAP over the top of it, because it just allows you to then give it a UI that's useful for different things. And then what we can do, so this feed bit in here, this is like how the WAPs then feed back into this place, because if I click on here, you can see there's like these are the ones that I use regularly enough to have links to them from here. But any one of these could run like its own business process in the background of what's going on. And so when things get to a certain level, you kind of want to like just bubble up approvals or alerts and various things. So that's what this feed allows you to do. So most of this is just the buck of sand stuff. So this is saying like, all right, we've looked at the news. Yeah, here you go. What's happened? More missiles, more death. This is all shit, isn't it? But there's, this is saying like, okay, I've updated your newspaper. Here's the latest story. And if you can click on this, you'll go straight into that story. You could also have in here like, so you could pop this up on Andy's flight deck and just say, oh yeah, Pete processed the podcast. It's available. It's now uploaded to YouTube. Here's the YouTube link. Here's the show notes link that you want. And here's the full transcript. And you can click through into any of those and just go to that web. So this is like the sort of control surface that brings it all together for everybody. And then, yeah, like that's just sort of how the webs kind of push back into it. But as I say, like that involves like you've got an app that's running down here. You've got pipelines that are running down here. It pushes up into the flight deck, like it via tower. It'll store all of the podcasts in the storage over here. Like it uses the Postgres to give access to like the database. Like, okay, where are we in the processing? And then Andy will download it onto a different autopilot because his autopilot can look at the same sort of thing. So it's quite a set of things that come together. So I kind of think of it as like a big, as you said, it is like a power user thing. It's a toolbox of how you would build all of these processes and all the bits that you need to do it. And then there's a set of agents and skills that sit in here where it's aware of itself. And because it's aware that, it has this like artifact WAP, it can send me stuff as artifacts, or, it's aware of the fact that it can run pipelines of work. So it'll say, okay, this looks like a pipeline. This is a workflow I need to run on a 5-minute schedule, or this is a workflow I need to run every time this triggers, or, this is like, so I can, it can run it can set all of that stuff up for me. And then the WAP bit is just right. Okay, if I need to see it, build me a custom interface for this bit of the process, and then push it up. And then like what I found was like, I've now got too many WAPs. So that's where this feed came in to say, all right, if you've got too much stuff going on and too many apps, this is like the common place that will surface updates. And then we just click through them. And we can almost have as many of these individual apps as we need that get surfaced here, because again, everything being a Nostra identity, we put it out there, we say who's got access to it, and as soon as I click in, it just asks me for my sign in with my browser extension, and I jump straight in. So it works remarkably well for that sort of stuff. If we can convince people to have Nostra keys, that's the major power.
Also, so for example, I guess people in the chat are probably going to be power users. So are they going to be able to, is it everything open source? Can someone get started now? And is also just self-hostable, right? What would someone need to be able to run this? Start using it?
So it's self-hostable. My view is you're best off running it on a dedicated machine, be that like, we've got this stack running on like old MacBook Airs, we've had it running on just various laptops. Linux is probably better, like Mac or Linux. I haven't really tested it at all on Windows because I just don't care too much about Windows. I don't have any of those machines, but I dare say it would work if you can set up the environment, and it can run in Docker, so you can do it. But you basically have a set of repos that you need. So Autopilot is that workhorse that does the apps, the DNS routing for you. It does the pipelines, it does the triggers, it does the agent sessions. That's all in Autopilot. That's the thing that does the majority of the work. Even if you just use that is a pretty nice way of dealing with multiple agents on one system and building these complex things. Then you would have what we got next, the tower. So the control tower, or the tower here, Wingman tower. I'll drop this in the chat as well as we go. So the tower is that back-end as a service. It's like a Nostr-based back-end as a service. And so what this does is this does your S3 buckets, it does your Postgres databases, and it does your graph database at the moment. And then exposes all that through an API service which uses NIP98 for all of its authentication. So this is, of all the bits with the rough edges, this is probably the hardest bit to set up. It's to actually just set yourself up with a new workspace, get it, like on the internet, so you can drop the URL into Flight Deck, and then you're good. But yeah, so I mean, if anybody is trying to get this set up, like, just reach out as well. And if there's a few people, I can always start a Flight Deck in a group, and we can jump in there and like get it going. But
okay, so you said URL. Do you need to have a domain?
Yes. Yeah, I do assume domains for all of this at the moment.
Okay. And it sounds like it's a little bit finicky to set up, so you'd need, I guess, the assumption is you have API access or subscriptions to the various LLM services. So you'd probably want to just point your agent, your LLM, existing agent or LLM at the repos and be like, hey, get this up and running. And that's the way you'd pain-free set up.
I can't remember. Yeah, so you can do, I can't remember what I set as my pin for this. So what you would do is, if you're running it on your local machine, it'll just use your agents as they are. If you're running it in Docker, then you use this you can like Docker exec into the terminal inside Docker and use that to set stuff up. But you can expose this. It's like a pin protected, terminal access via autopilot, and then you can like just go in and set up all of the subscriptions that you need. So one of the benefits of this way of doing it is, so under the hood, like we use Codex uses its SDK, I'm pretty sure. Goose Pi use ACP protocol for communication. OpenCode uses its own SDK for communication with the agents. And then the odd one out is Claude Code. So Claude Code, we use something called Agent API, which was put together by the Coda team years ago. And they do, what that does, it would allow you to run multiple different agents. But it runs it in a way that you can still use your Claude Code subscription. So, I mean, how long that persists, who knows? But I think for most, like, if you try and access Claude Code through ACP, you can't use your subscription and your, as we said yesterday, it's not quite all you can eat anymore. It's like all will allow access to Claude models. So, but if that's something that's interesting to you, then that's good. I mean, I find Claude a whiny little bitch and have done for about a year now, so I just don't use it. If I'm using a sort of allowed model, it'll probably be Codex. And then if I'm not using Codex, it's probably something like, it's either a DeepSeek, a Quen, or a Kimi model in the background. But three various different things. And as I said, I'm very keen to get the Maple agent up so I can take advantage of their stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I'm a sole trader. I guess I have like a very narrow line of work, but for me, what interests me is the consolidation of just bringing all the various things I'm working on together, because I currently work across different CLIs, different like desktop apps, different systems, and it just becomes all a bit unwieldy. Like I've kind of just got very scatterbrain kind of mentality now because shit is everywhere. So this seems like a really great way to like pull everything together into a common place, and then also like allow those connections to form between things, because they are there, but it's just really hard to coordinate that at the moment. Just have a nice clean way to see everything that's going on, and to bring chaos. So to help manage the chaos, calm the chaos.
I can see that. I mean, that's where this came from. Was so I was this like autopilot workflow of like UI of doing stuff. This is better than it ever. Like, this is more usable than it's ever been, but I don't work in this anymore. But what I found is that like this was better than working across multiple CLIs. And I had one interface that I was working for, and like I mean, as we said yesterday when we were reviewing it afterwards, like even stuff like being able to consistently like upload images and it not be shit, right? Like that's so annoying in terminal world. It's like it's so painful sometimes, particularly when you're remoted into a different box, and like it's like I don't want to learn all this stuff about tmux. Like, it's not helpful to me. Like it's just like it's a little bit painful. I just want it to work. This is easier. Like I know a bunch of people will use something like a terminal thing on their phone to remote in SSH into a remote box. And it's like just have access to it as a website and just use the website to get in there, or put it on Tailscale and just use the website via Tailscale. Like, and then you've still got public private key, like access to this sort of thing. So it's pretty good. Like I'm a fan. So this did a lot of like the heavy lifting of getting me into one place where I had one interface for all of these different systems. And then I found that I would have like 10 different tabs across the top, and in those 10 different tabs I would start, it was almost like too much overhead to consistently like stop tabs, decide when I'm going to go from like, all right, this one I was working on like the chat interface in Flight Deck, but now I want to do stuff on tasks. Am I going to start a new session for that or not? Like all of that management of the tabs and how many plates I wanted to spin at once was just like mental effort that I had to deal with. And then I would have to like, if I'm starting up in a new session, I would have like, if I'm working across something that touches if we look at the artifact, like this is a repo, this is a repo, this is a repo, and then we might have a WAP repo in here as well. And it's like, this is like to work across like the whole thing. If I've got something that impacts on flight deck that needs tower and autopilot to respond, it's painful. And now I've got 3 different sessions. So I manage it in 3 different sessions, or do I start it in one over here that looks at them both? Like, how do I organize all of that stuff? And all of that has now gone away with flight deck, because I will say at the suite level, I've got my description of how the suite works. And again, like all the work just routes to Rick, and then Rick will say, all right, these are the updates that I need in the tower. These are the updates that I need in the in autopilot, and these are the updates that I need in flight deck, and it will manage all of those in the background. So every one of those becomes a new session, and then those sessions are turned off, so I don't have to see them. They don't cloud the workspace. And then if it responds and its response is crap, we start a new session. And again, we're always starting from fresh context windows, so it solves a lot of the problems that you would have with context management and stuff. And then there's one more piece. I kind of started showing this to you a little bit yesterday, which is another thing that we do in the background. So the graph that we talked about as being a core part of Tower is predominantly just used for like knowledge management purposes. So it would be a case of like as you're learning stuff from the news and you're following my interests around, like, Bitcoin and AI news and these different areas that I've pointed you at, just build a knowledge base of information that you can query and go and find stuff out about. And that's great. That's one graph that we have inside that graph service. And then another one that we looked at was to say, all right, well, what would be useful for, like, say, the coding agent, and when Rick's trying to like just dispatch work, is to say, okay, well, this is going to touch 3 different places. So one of the things it will do is it'll consult this architecture and go, okay, well, how does it work? Like, how do UI changes supposed to update? And I'm going to build out more versions of this as I go. It's kind of new that I've bothered doing that. And then this code map is saying, like, every hour what we do is we scan all of the repos that are actively being worked on at the moment, and I'm sort of pulling them into a code graph, like using LSPs to figure out, okay, well, how does the code fit together? What calls what? What's the relationship between, these endpoints or like these calls from flight deck that hit these endpoints on the tower, and then how does autopilot read these? And so then we pull all those in. So like, this is the idea to say, look, if you're looking at agent dispatch, which is Pete's written a message inside the flight deck chat, it writes a signed message into Tower. The autopilot subscription to that Tower service that's like emitted via the SSE stream needs to then trigger and respond to that, and then send back the message. And so what this will do is say, okay, this is these are all the code, the areas of the code that are touched in that chain. So I need to do a lot more experimentation with this just to make sure it's all correct. But again, the idea here is to say, all right, when you're dispatching, if you're just Rick and you're not doing the work, but you need to understand some context about the work to know where to dispatch, like this is a useful service where you can just say, right, I go to the tower and I ask, okay, I'm working on agent dispatch, I'm working on chat records, I'm working on the daily focus, I'm working on graph indexing. Which repos do I need to be aware of? And then where in those repos should I start my search? And then when it then delegates off to like a sub-agent to say, okay, how is this going to be impacted? It can give it this level of guidance. So again, we're like compressing a lot of that just general looking around the code base. We can just be a little bit more exact on this. So this is an idea that I just kind of nicked from Stackwork, from when I used to work with those guys, where they'd done a lot of work in just, maybe it's over a year ago, maybe 14 months now. I think they were doing full like code base reads into graphs and then using agents to build stuff, and it's very effective for just giving better context to agents. So I'm experimenting with it a little bit now for generally building it into flight deck. As I said, the other way we do it is to just build knowledge around the organization. So you could have research knowledge, you can have like your code base knowledge, you can have just like who is the organization and what does it know, you can have like CRM based stuff. inside the graph, but it just gives you that different place to build up those knowledge bases and then make them available to people, both agents and humans, because every agent and every human has an npub, so all of them can read from the tower, and it just makes all of the sort of management of that access control like easier downstream. We're not having to treat agents and people differently. Sorry, that was a
Well, I know it's your live stream. I know it's a live stream, but maybe we want to call it here because there's a lot of information, and probably if anyone's interested, they have enough to go off and at least start with. And maybe we should do this again, like in a fortnight or so. So I would have played with it by then, got a bit of better of an understanding, and we can dive into. Go a bit deeper and see how things are working, or what you've changed in the next fortnight. How does that sound?
Yeah, I mean, I for the first time ever, I feel like I've got to a point where I feel like I'm not going to add new features. Like I feel like I've got most of the bits that I need. Like, and I can tell. I think I said to you, like it's the first time where I'm working with agents across many different things, and it feels fine. Like I don't feel like just wired, or like I'm dropping the ball on stuff that happened but I forgot about it and I've never tested it. Like this kind of gives me most of the stuff that I need, so I'm hoping that I can kind of just harden it up and make it a lot more performant and useful at this point. But yeah, but historically that's not how it's happened, so we'll see.
No, well, yeah, okay, well I would like to onboard onto this and try and bring some more clarity to what I'm doing. So maybe we can, it can be like a post-onboarding review of what I've done, how the process went, and what the rough edges were, and where, for me, I think that things can change, or what I noticed anyway, right? So,
yep. All right. Well, I reckon that'll be useful to just get that feedback, because as I said, like it's so hard when you're used to doing your own work to then take yourself out and go from that new beginner mindset. But yeah, let's do it. All right. Thank you. It was useful to have someone to play off there.
No worries. All right.
Hopefully the stream's still running. We'll see. All right. See you later, man. You might need to stay on the line for a minute just to finish uploading stuff, but
I can see it in another tab. Please.
All right, cool.
There's another tab. It's opened.
All right, let's do it. All right. I'll stop the stream and then we'll stay on for a minute. Did that stop?